Like a servant. Siren's face darkened as he looked annoyed and asked Fiona, "Who told you that? Use a nicer word, Your Highness. Why are you curious about that?" Fiona gave him a judging look. Siren clenched both hands tightly, his gaze sharp and voice somewhat dangerous. "As a friend, I have to send my greetings, and thanks to the person who made you feel moved." Fiona thought Siren's jealousy was getting old, just thinking he was saying strange things again. Then she answered him. "The one who said that to me is Miss Libya. Do you know her?" Siren asked. "Libya? She's clearly from the Priscilla family." "Wait, that's a girl," he said as he figured out who praised her. The girl of his dreams was a girl. He sighed in relief and his face relaxed. "I've never been moved by a man," he chuckled. "I'll have to thank her later." Fiona was a bit confused by Siren's usual mood. Suddenly his mood became cheerful again, but she still smiled happily, looking at him attentively. She didn't know why, but as long as he was happy, that was enough. Siren also noticed she was looking at him. He looked back attentively, a question flashing in his eyes. "Why are you staring at me like that?" Fiona saw Siren's gaze was a bit strange, startled, forced a smile, and turned away, thinking, "Sometimes he looks at me like that. I don't understand why." Then Siren broke the awkward atmosphere. "I heard you have to win the hunting competition, right?" "Yes, have you heard the news?" she answered. Siren continued. "Aben?" "No, the teacher told me about it." "Really? I will participate in that hunt too." Fiona heard that and said, "Then we're rivals." Hearing this, a big question mark appeared in Siren's mind. "Rivals? What rivals?" Fiona explained. "We're rivals. Actually, I aim to win against the Crown Prince and other knights, but I didn't expect you to." Siren smiled, satisfied, holding Fiona's hand. "If you tell me not to join, I won't." Fiona was confused. "Why?" Siren didn't answer immediately, but gently kissed her hand. "Because I am not the enemy, but his henchman." Emotions were pushed to the peak. Fiona thought this level was common among nobles. But when Siren did it, the impact was completely different. She blushed, shyly stammering, "Don't say things like that. This is the first hunting competition you participate in after becoming a prince, and you can't easily lose a good opportunity to show your ability. If you're interested in a certain lady, you can use this competition to show her a cool image." Fiona blushed, forcing a smile as she spoke at length. Siren thought silently that he looked so embarrassed, he couldn't say a word. Indeed, there was such an event in the rules. Siren won the competition and gave the monster to Eunice. The hunting competition was not just about capturing monsters, but also a romantic event for young nobles. The person who caught the monster would gift it to their lover or the one they secretly admired. Because of this, many people got married. Siren joked. "The lady I like, huh? Of course." Hearing this, Fiona paused and forced a smile. "Huh? Really?" She worried. Could it be he has met Eunice? While I didn't know? Siren noticed her unusual expression, lightly pressed her forehead, and asked reproachfully, "Are you thinking nonsense?" "Strange, I feel a little sad," Fiona thought to herself. The hunting competition finally began. Fiona excitedly lifted the curtain to look outside. Each camp had its own family crest. She asked, "Whose family crest is that red one?" The Duke Aben showed clear worry and discomfort. "The weather is terribly hot, isn't it?" "The weather in the capital is indeed hotter than in Halo," Fiona continued. "Duke, aren't you going to participate?" Aben drank water continuously. "No, I prefer watching you kids make a fool of yourselves." Fiona felt a bit embarrassed by the foolishness. Aben didn't forget to remind her, "This weather is quite hot for the kid, so finish the competition with a high rank before you get exhausted. There can't be high-level monsters in the hunting competition. If such a dangerous competition is just for the royal family and nobles to enjoy, then—" Before Fiona finished speaking, a voice suddenly interrupted. "Excuse me, Duke Halo. May I talk to Lady Fiona for a moment?" Fiona recognized the acquaintance. Lady Libya. She heard Libya say something and suddenly asked, "Huh? The horse I caught in the hunting competition?" Libya smiled. "Yes, and made a proposal. Could you give me the horse you caught?" "Why?" "Because, lady, you will surely win the competition." Lady Libya's proposal made Fiona embarrassed. "Thank you for trusting me, but the competition hasn't even started yet." Libya continued, "You don't have to be modest. I already know the truth, that you are the protector of Halo's walls." Lady Libya's words made Fiona a bit shy. "Really?" Meanwhile, Siren was yawning loudly while riding a horse, cutting across the two ladies' conversation. "I bet Lady Fiona will win. It seems the other strong candidates, including Prince Siren, have no ambition at all. Fiona looked at His Highness the Prince, puzzled. Siren, you just yawned. Didn't you say you have someone you like? Returning to the conversation between the two ladies, Fiona continued. So what do you mean when you say I should give you a monster? That's usually how knights and clerics show affection to nobles, Libya said thoughtfully. Otherwise, the crown prince would give me the monster. Fiona seemed to understand something. If I, as the winner, give the monster to Lady Libya, then the crown prince won't be able to give another monster because his pride would be hurt. As she spoke, she imagined it exactly. If you help me, I will help you strengthen your social status. Fiona wondered. How? The red-haired lady continued. You are from the Halo family and support Prince Siren. The Queen will definitely not look favorably on you. Honestly, in society there are surely many who want to make a joke out of you, so I will help you. Just like that? My social status is quite solid too. Hearing Libya speak, Fiona's long-held doubts were somewhat shaken. She thought clearly that she had many weaknesses that could be exploited in society. Even if she was the heir of the Halo family, she was still just a person. No matter what, she was in a position opposing the crown prince at any time. It seems building a close relationship with the neutral faction. Priscilla isn't too bad either. After thinking, Fiona agreed to Libya's proposal. All right. I will make Miss Libya the one who receives the most magical beasts in the competition. Today, the two young ladies held hands closely. Libya achieved her goal and smiled smugly. Ah, ha 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 ha, I will be waiting for you. What will come, will come. The official competition began. The horn sounded repeatedly, and the contestants started galloping forward. Fiona looked around and admired the atmosphere, truly magnificent, even though it was just a hunting competition. But nobles and royals were still fully protected. Surely Siren was too, right? There were a few more people behind her now. Suddenly, a knight behind shouted, Miss Fiona, danger! At the same time, a bird-type magical beast flew towards her. Fiona reflexively snapped her fingers twice. A small explosion occurred in the air. The magical beast was immediately burned and fell heavily to the ground. Everyone was shocked. Only Fiona in the middle was still dazed. Ah, lighting a fire here, is it dangerous? She smiled calmly. In Highland there weren't many dense trees, so it was fine. But here, a fire could break out. Fiona didn't notice that beside her, Duke Ernest had witnessed everything. He frowned, both angry and worried. Fiona Halo unexpectedly has such abilities. If this continues, the victory will clearly belong to Fiona. If so, what will I look like in society? He schemed something and spoke to his guards. We will relocate. Where do you intend to go, sir? Outside the boundary line? Upon hearing this, everyone's faces showed confusion, but there might be high-level magical beasts there. Ernest ignored the guards' objections and decisively ordered departure. He thought to himself that it couldn't be like this. While galloping, he shouted, I'm coming here. In his mind, Ernest was already thinking about defeating Fiona, that arrogant girl. I will make you discouraged. The sound of horse hooves clattered. Rushing past Fiona like flying were the knights of Duke Ernest. Why are they in such a hurry? I wonder what's going on. Before Fiona could finish wondering, a laugh suddenly rang out. Ha ha, it seems I know what this is about. Fiona turned her head and saw a familiar face, Duke Errand Clovis. He continued, maybe that person wants to target the big prize so as not to lose to the young lady. The young lady is also moving to another spot to hunt, right? Fiona replied, my stamina is a bit weak, so I plan to rest for a while. Upon hearing this, Arn's face showed a bit of sadness. Really? Then he continued, Miss Fiona has been fighting monsters in Halo for a long time, right? I want to hear your opinion about the monsters. If I can help answer, please tell me. Aaron pressed on. I wonder if the young lady has ever heard of the shadow. Hearing this, Fiona was a bit startled. She silently thought of a question she had somewhat anticipated. The shadow Aaron was talking about was not a word used in the usual sense. She answered him, yes, I have heard of it. The only reason Fiona became the boss in the original story was because she was defeated 7 times trying to deal with this shadow. The shadow is an entity without a definite shape. It usually appears without warning, so there is no way to avoid it. If it appears then, the land will become barren, and the surrounding monsters will become aggressive. Fiona continued, I heard that if the shadow phenomenon appears, the monsters in the area become much stronger and more violent. Yes, that's right. The name shadow was given by academic scholars when they first discovered the phenomenon, but the scholars couldn't Verify anything related to the shadow, because those who directly saw the shadow Aaron hadn't finished speaking. Fiona took over. None of them survived. He forced a smile. Yes, that's right. So usually those who touch the shadow cannot survive. Because only one person witnessed the phenomenon directly, naturally, the information about it is very limited. However, in reality, there is indeed one person who survived after touching the shadow, and that person is standing in front of you, Aaron Clovis. When he was young, despite witnessing the moment the shadow appeared, he survived, although it left serious after effects on him, and to minimize those after effects as much as possible, he always carries a specially crafted magic stone. He has been delaying time like that and is searching for a way to eliminate the existence of the shadow as well as the after effects that are corroding his body. Fiona thought silently. This is the story where Aaron confessed to the person he liked, Eunice. So I can't show that I know what she said to Aaron at Halo. Also, very concerned about the darkness, but that phenomenon has never appeared, so the information is extremely limited. That's right, Aaron proposed a hypothesis. He put the stone in front of Fiona, explaining that this is not just an ordinary stone, but a magical stone. Magical stones are what help delay the after effects of the darkness. And magical stones are influenced by magic. If so, wouldn't a very powerful mage be able to use magic to manipulate the darkness of the star? And the mage suitable for testing that hypothesis is Fiona. But Fiona currently obviously has no intention of helping Aaron, so she turned her horse to leave. After a few steps, she was called back. Hey, what are you two doing here alone? It turned out to be Siren. Aaron respectfully greeted the prince. Your Highness, I was just taking a short rest, looking at the two smiling quietly in front of him. Siren teased me. I heard you bet with Duke Ernest, but you look quite relaxed, Miss Fiona. She heard that and got a flush of anger on her face, feeling upset, thinking, So you're calling me lazy, huh? Then replied, Your Highness, Siren seems quite bored with this competition, right? Your monster carriage still has plenty of space. Siren heard that, but still kept teasing Miss. You kicked the horse with a thud, then exclaimed, It really is dull, so I will rest with you two, saying that he led the horse Chen between Fiona and Aaron. That action made Fiona start judging him. What is he doing? Unlike Fiona, Aaron happily and brightly welcomed the prince. Oh my God. It's an honor to spend time with your Highness. Fiona, hearing this, could only grit her teeth and endure. Well, I will take my leave from this rest period, breaking the strange atmosphere among the three. Fiona galloped to the other side. Excuse me, good luck to you two. But she hadn't taken half a step. The sky suddenly darkened. Several bird-like monsters began circling. At the same time, the horn of the competition sounded, making Fiona wonder, isn't this the signal that the hunting competition has ended? Aaron continued, No, it's still a long way from the end time, but why blow the horn now? Before he finished, Siren interrupted. It means something has happened, and it's in a bad direction. He spurred the horse forward. At this time, Fiona was beside Duke Aben. Look, Fiona, these are the monsters the other hunting teams have brought back. Outside, they look like common low-level monsters. But looking closely, you'll see their teeth and claws are bigger than usual. Hearing Duke's words, Fiona continued expressing her opinion. The muscles in their legs and skin are also firmer. Originally, they were creatures very vulnerable to fire, but with the tough outer layer, even big flames probably wouldn't affect them much, Aben continued. There is really only one reason that caused them to mutate like this. Fiona seemed to realize something. It was the appearance of the darkness. Suddenly from afar a cry echoed. Someone is injured. Quickly call the doctor. It turned out the person just brought back was Annis. Just after first aid, he sat on the bed panting heavily and stammered. I saw the scorched dead land, he recounted. Also encountering a very strong magical beast that had been transformed. Thanks to the darkness, on the other side, the control area had only fought them for a short time, but the mounted knights were already dead and fainted. Aben looked at the trembling man in front of him and said, Luckily it seems that was just a patch of land where darkness appeared. If we had encountered the darkness at the exact time it appeared, everyone would have died. Then he shouted an order. Everyone retreat from the camp immediately. Quickly confirm if anyone is left in the hunting area. As soon as he finished, a female knight ran panting to report. The monsters followed the blood scent and appeared at the south entrance. Sir, with a very large number. At that place Siren and other knights were still fighting desperately. Those not fighting immediately retreated to the rear. Those who could fight quickly took up weapons. Siren gave orders on this side. Fiona, after hearing the report, immediately prepared to run. Aben, seeing that, asked Fiona, "Child." But before he could speak, she replied, "I will fight," Aben continued, intending to tell her to retreat to the safe area. Because she looked quite exhausted, but Fiona smiled brightly. That would be a waste of manpower. Saying that she ran like the wind, thinking as she ran, "I must quickly find those who need urgent help first." Then I charged to the front line, running past a camp, and heard a female voice, "I will take care of the victims first before leaving." But Miss Eunice, the name Eunice made Fiona curious. On this side, the blonde lady was sitting on the ground treating the injured. "Someone needs detoxification right now. I will treat these people first and then go with you afterward. Someone with healing powers like me can't just leave patients unattended." Fiona turned to look at the blonde lady. Unable to hide her surprise, she looked at Eunice with sparkling eyes full of admiration and secret joy. The beautiful and kind female lead. "Now I will detoxify immediately." Fiona looked at Eunice with sparkling eyes full of admiration. Secretly happy. The beautiful and kind female lead. "Now I will detoxify immediately." Eunice spoke in Fiona's thoughts, while everyone else was running away. Eunice was bravely alone like that. Very commendable and talented, noticing someone was looking at her. Eunice turned her head back. It was her. "You shouldn't be here. A monster is coming," Fiona immediately replied. "I'm fine." As they were talking, behind Eunice, a monster suddenly charged forward, sharp claws ready to bite her. Fiona shouted. Eunice dodged, and by reflex, Fiona hugged Eunice, pulling her close. "Damn it, don't leave me!" One hand holding Eunice tightly, the other using magic to blast the monster away. Then she turned back to ask Eunice if she was okay. Eunice stammered, "Miss, who exactly are you?" "I am Fiona Halo, just learned the identity of my savior." Eunice bowed and thanked repeatedly. "Thank you for saving me, Miss Fiona. I am Eunice Arlene." "I know. I've heard your name before," she replied. But in her heart, Fiona silently realized this was the female lead character she created, and Eunice was the name she gave her. On the other side, an engineer was writhing on the ground in pain, groaning. "Hoo-hoo, it hurts so much." Eunice heard the voice and hurriedly said, "I'm sorry. I will treat and get you out of here immediately." Seeing this, Fiona suggested, "Let me protect you. Don't worry about your surroundings. Just focus on treating the patients. There are patients over there too." Eunice looked at Fiona with some reluctance, preparing to leave, thanking her verbally, but thinking she actually had something to ask her. So Fiona had to kill several monsters to protect Eunice, but the number of monsters to defeat was countless. Fiona was now exhausted and confused. What to do? No matter how many she killed, the number didn't seem to decrease at all. Recalling what the engineer said earlier, it would be hard to wait for reinforcements from the palace. Fiona remembered the engineer's words. "I sent a message to the palace, but because they need to prepare for a long journey, it's hard to arrive immediately. Moreover, dark clouds are gathering. If it rains, body temperature will drop, making movement slow and vision limited. On the contrary, the monsters are almost unaffected." Fiona clicked her tongue and snapped her fingers. A spark flashed, blasting away all the monsters in front of her. First, just keep fighting the monsters. Thinking so, the power was great, but she was exhausted, however. Thanks to that, Fiona discovered that these monsters feared fire. Originally, before mutation, these monsters were creatures weak to fire. Although their bodies looked tough, they might still retain their original survival instincts. Fiona looked at the monsters in front of her, rubbing her chin, thinking most monsters were wolf-like species, so she could use this method. She muttered, although a bit crazy. But suddenly Eunice's voice rang out, "No, you can't come here. They can't get close to the patients." Eunice shouted while kneeling on the ground, spreading her arms to block the monsters. But the monsters didn't listen to her. They roared and charged straight at Fiona. Seeing this, Fiona reflexively called her name, thinking Eunice and the patients behind her would be devoured by the monsters. Then a voice rang out. Lowering their heads, the monsters were instantly killed by a slash. The one who came to save Eunice was Siren. He caught her. This scene made Fiona excited. Could this be the live scene of the two main characters? Siren and Eunice looked at each other. She bowed to thank him. He nodded politely. Then both turned away, everyone doing their own thing. Fiona felt a bit disappointed and blurted out to the prince, "Your Highness, just putting your sword on your shoulder and walking away? Is that all? Where's my romance?" Siren found it strange and asked what was wrong, but amidst Fiona's regret, she felt a bit happy without understanding why. Siren banged his head against hers, wondering if she was thinking something strange. Instead of answering directly, Siren Fiona chose to steer the conversation towards monster extermination. It's not a strange thought, but I have a very good idea, Siren asked what it was. On second thought, we don't necessarily have to kill all the monsters for everyone's safety. Here's the top priority. And no matter how skilled you and the Duke are, you can't protect everyone. So it's not enough to just chase them away, right? Siren probably still didn't understand the meaning of the girl beside him. Fiona continued, these monsters, compared to physical strength, their minds are not very intelligent. They only act on instinct. Now, even a small flame, they hesitate and don't dare to step over it. Siren admired. Someone as experienced as you has made that judgment, so it must be right. Fiona saw Siren didn't object and suggested, so Siren, let's turn this place into a big torch. Saying that, she cast a fire spell that flared up, blocking the monsters ahead. Eunice looked at the scene and became worried. On the other side, Duke Aaron and Lady Libya also saw the fire suddenly flare up. I heard Lady Fiona perform this magic. I wonder if Lady Fiona is okay. Aaron smiled brightly. Haha, I'm a bit worried too. But it seems Lady Fiona possesses overwhelming power beyond what I thought. Libya agreed, saying, You're right, it's truly overwhelming. Fiona cast the spell. The fire flared up surrounding her. Eunice marveled. She remained graceful amid the sea of flames. If she were human, she would obviously be burned. But her appearance was eerily different. Aben and Siren stood watching. Not sure whether to praise or criticize, he muttered. It's truly a foolish plan, but it's not simply fear. On the contrary, it's overwhelmingly attractive. Sometimes humans both reject and are attracted to what is different in a contradictory way. Everyone, including Duke Ernest and the guards, was left speechless, watching the orange-red embers flutter with her platinum hair, yet not a single strand caught fire. Truly a strange and remarkable person. Later, those present would recall this scene. Embers burning like jewels, woven into her hair, both overwhelmingly powerful and terrifyingly alluring. That person was Fiona Halo. That day, thanks to Fiona's power, the incident at the hunting contest was resolved smoothly. Fiona was surprised looking at the pile of gifts before her, holding many in her arms, and asked Duke Aben again, All of these are really gifts for me? Yes, they are tokens of gratitude for your help in the hunting contest. While speaking, Aben added another fruit to Fiona's hands and continued, The capital suffered no damage from the magical beasts, and I even provoked those indifferent people. Finally, scholars and a sweeping force were sent to the Dead Land. He frowned. But so what? We can only start acting when we get closer. Fiona looked at Aben with some worry. It's truly a bitter matter for Halo. There's no other way. Human psychology usually has to confront itself to become more serious. Fiona thought silently, though she was the planner. She propped her chin and looked at the Duke beside her, playfully asked, So you've changed now, haven't you? Aben replied coldly. Without careful observation, Aben was gradually becoming disillusioned. At least Aaron still stood up to discuss the magical beasts. That's why I said everything. Aben broke the silence and immediately asked about Fiona's health. During the hunting contest, she fainted from overexertion. Aben was quicker than Siren by one step, so it was me who carried her back, not Siren, he complained while walking. I told you my foster daughter needs a lot of care, but after waking up, Fiona still had to lie in bed for several days to recover. Aben took the chance to tease her, saying, While you still can rest, just rest well. I think there won't be many days like this in the future. Fiona smiled faintly. Watching Aben tap the pile of letters on the desk, she laughed. These are all invitations from the nobility to Fiona. She sighed, so I've officially debuted in noble society. Honestly, I'm not confident in socializing. Aben offered encouragement, though it didn't really sound encouraging. It's nothing, just be careful. The noble ladies on the Queen's side will be fine. I wish Libya could help. The hunting contest was interrupted halfway. Making a deal with her also turned into a blank sheet of paper. Fiona sighed heavily, catching Aben's attention with a sideways glance in the end. Is it time for me to walk on my own feet now? At this moment, Fiona arrived at the training ground where Siren was practicing. Fiona, what did you say? Siren asked while lifting his shirt to wipe the sweat off his forehead. I said you've been training regularly lately, right? He replied. The corrupted beasts have appeared in the forest near the capital. You have to train while you still can. Fiona looked at the knights during their training. being tormented by Siren until they fainted, collapsing and rolling on the ground with swollen heads. She reminded them, but don't overdo it. You have countless enemies inside. Siren replied somewhat coldly. You know, I'm not good at socializing. Fiona helplessly glanced at the young man beside her, thinking silently that this was the problem. Siren has no one to talk to or confide in. Although in Halo there are people who admire Siren, none are worth calling a friend. Not even one friend to share his feelings with, so from the outside he looks quite sad. Surely there are also problems he can't talk about with friends of the opposite sex. As I know, I created a friend for Siren when writing the novel, thinking that, she said to Siren. Siren, although I've talked a lot about this before she finished, he interrupted her, hoping I will have everything and live happily, right? Yeah, that's right, thanks for caring about me. However, trusting others is impossible, Siren said while walking. And you don't have any friends besides me either. Fiona was stunned hearing this, holding her head with wide eyes and an open mouth, thinking, that's so true. Can't argue. I don't have friends either. Siren took advantage and continued teasing her, saying, You're not worthy of scolding me. The more he spoke, the more panicked Fiona became. In her mind, perhaps the plan now was to find friends for herself first. That's right. I have to find friends first. Then show Siren the happiness of having friends. But as usual, every time Fiona's face changed color, Siren still asked Fiona, Are you thinking in some weird direction again? When asked, Fiona would still answer no. No, I think very rationally. I'll show you what socializing is. Siren stood with arms crossed seriously looking at her and asked, Anyway, now you have officially started working in politics, right? Fiona leaned on the balcony. Yes. For now I have to deal with some invitations first. So, temporarily, don't come to my palace anymore. Fiona felt like she was struck by lightning, panicking, not knowing what she did for Siren to tell her not to come anymore. She asked, Am I obstructing you? Yeah, then rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I have nowhere to go, so I ran to find Siren too often. So what? Or maybe because I keep forcing him to make friends. Siren saw the person in front of him had the words confused plastered on his face, so he poked and said as if he knew what the other was thinking. Stop thinking nonsense. None of that is true. Fiona worriedly asked. Then why was there a new knight just assigned to my palace? He is from the heiress family. The heiress Marquis family is the representative family for those who support the crown prince. Fiona frowned in discomfort and replied, That family entering your palace? Too obvious. Siren guessed they definitely wanted to monitor me. I was going to kick him out, but unfortunately couldn't find any excuse. So, temporarily, don't come here to be cautious, at least until I can kick him out of the palace. Fiona heard that and had to accept, Okay, I understand. Although Siren can handle this himself, it's really pitiful for the person being kicked out in Halo style. That night at the Queen's party, Her Majesty in a fancy red dress just saw Libya, called her over and praised. You look so elegant today. Libya bowed politely and replied, You're too kind, Your Majesty. Libya appeared in a sparkling white dress, decorated with lace patterns and embroidered flower strips crossing the chest and golden rose flowers on the shoulders and hips. The Queen said, It's unbelievable that someone as charming as you is already of marriageable age, yet still alone. Libya smiled on the outside, but only about age. I still have many shortcomings, but internally she was very annoyed. She's not even my mother. Why mention marriage? Humility is a virtue. Beautiful, but humans have their moments. Let's see. What do you think of my son Enoch? Although he is a bit hot-tempered, his nature is very good. Hearing the Queen say this, Libya thought to herself, The Crown Prince is only a bit hot-tempered? The Queen continued, Have you noticed that Enoch also has feelings for you? Surely you know well, right? Both the young men and women are at their most beautiful age. And standing next to each other, they make such a beautiful couple. Libya remained calm. Everything was expressed through her elegant and sharp demeanor, and the tactfulness when responding to the Queen. Yes, you are right. However, one person is still not mature enough, like me. I only know how to follow my father's wishes. The door opened. Libya stepped out in a magnificent outfit, escaping the awkwardness. When talking to the Queen, she sighed, thinking to herself, If I become the Crown Princess, the Priscilla family, always neutral, will side with the prince, right? Although my father does not unreasonably force me to marry someone I dislike, I can use an excuse. Listening to my father's wishes. How long can this last? I must find a way quickly. The only eligible suitors for my family are either Marquis Clovis or Prince Siren, but if the other party is Prince Siren, then father would have to abandon neutrality. So that's not possible. As for Marquis Clovis, she was thinking while walking. Then she met the Siren and Fiona couple, who just called her name Miss Libya. I am His Highness the Prince, Miss Fiona. Fiona cheerfully greeted her. Are you also visiting the palace? Siren looked at the two girls bowing and chatting, his face blank with curiosity. Who is this woman? Libya continued. I thought I would meet the young lady again at the banquet hosted by Her Majesty the Queen. Unexpectedly, I meet you here. The banquet, where many young people will attend, right? Yes, I heard that. Many people's relationships there have deepened. Have you planned to invite anyone as your partner yet? Fiona asked, but perhaps Libya already had the answer in mind. Oh, ho. Siren glanced at Fiona, thinking to himself, indeed, in this palace besides her, no young lady is as lovely as Libya. She smiled happily because the couple in front of her was so passionate. He couldn't take his eyes off the young lady. Her excitement made both Siren and Fiona puzzled. But Siren had a somewhat judgmental look. To break the awkward atmosphere, Libya spoke again. So jealous because the young lady doesn't have to worry about a marriage partner, Fiona wondered. A marriage partner? Who knows, maybe something interesting will happen at this banquet. Who knows? Could there be someone diligently preparing something? Siren's face blushed as he turned away. Fiona was confused, not understanding what the red-haired young lady meant by preparing. Preparing what? Have you received the invitation letter from Her Majesty the Queen? Libya asked. Yes. Then, Miss Libya, I'm sorry, but I'll see you later. Libya looked at Siren and Fiona preparing to leave and smiled slyly, probably mainly to tease the prince. Siren was blushing deeply. The invitation from the Queen, the paper confirming the invitation to one of the annual parties, hosted by the Queen. The annual ball is held at the beginning of the season, with many young nobles participating. The age range here is from the late teens to the late 20s, according to Libya. It seems there are many deep relationships formed there. But Fiona thought silently, such matters do not concern her. She just took out the Queen's letter to read when Duke Aben suddenly came by. He stretched out his hand and took the letter from her shoulder, saying, The Queen's invitation? Has it arrived already? So your partner is Siren? Aben asked Fiona. So your partner is Siren? I haven't asked yet, so it must be me. I invited the Duke, didn't I? If not Siren, then it can only be me. Who else? The two walked and chatted back and forth like that. Fiona continued. But, going with a guardian, when you're an adult, it's really a rustic thing. Aben gently tapped her forehead affectionately, saying, Rustic? So what? I am your father. Seeing Fiona touched by him, Aben smiled proudly. Touched, huh? Then just call me Chatty, no need for formality. I will return that feeling. The atmosphere at the party was very lively, everyone dressed elegantly, chatting and socializing until Fiona entered, and most eyes turned to her. Miss Fiona is here. She came with Duke Aben. Fiona appeared in a silver evening gown accented with a rose ribbon running from the shoulder down to the skirt. She looked at Aben and asked, Should we greet the host first? Sure, though I'm not very interested. The relationship between Aben and the king was very bad. The queen probably noticed Aben's presence inside. Oh my. I didn't expect the Duke to come here too, Aben replied. It's rare to be invited. I must attend to fulfill my duty. The queen glanced at Fiona and asked, Is the young lady beside you, Fiona? Upon hearing her name, she immediately bowed. Greetings, Your Majesty the Queen. I am Fiona Halo. Ah, the person in the rumors that's spreading, huh? I heard she is the Duke's adopted daughter. Halo, the girl attending with her foster father? That's indeed rare. Aben kept a friendly smiling face and answered the Queen because no one has yet satisfied him. Fiona, though forewarned, felt embarrassed when she heard it directly. The Queen raised her fan to cover half of her smile. It seems you truly cherish your adopted daughter, and all the rumors I've heard about Miss Fiona must be misunderstandings, right? From the beginning of the conversation until now, Lord Aben has maintained the same expression, one smile. But it seems now it's a bit distorted. Yes, if I didn't know about them, surely. Those are matters not worth worrying about. I hope Your Majesty the Queen will not be swayed by those rumors. Hearing this, the Queen praised Aben, but it seemed not entirely praising his dignified attitude. Many years have passed and you still haven't changed. Truly a consistent person. Fiona, hearing her say that to her foster father, also understood her meaning. The old man is still arrogant. Aben took the opportunity to reply, Every time I meet Your Majesty the Queen, I feel overwhelmed. It's wonderful to see someone gracefully accepting the flow of time so nobly. Fiona also understood the implication in Aben's words, meaning, she is very old now. The atmosphere around began to change, feeling like sharp thorns surrounded them. The two spoke like people worried, as if sitting on a fire. It was Fiona, who thought silently, as people often say, when oxen fight, the flies die. She thought, it's no wonder Aben didn't get support from the central authority. Suddenly, Prince Siren stepped forward. Excuse me for a moment. The queen saw him and immediately frowned. Prince Siren, why are you interrupting the conversation like this? Truly rude. Siren remained calm, hoping for forgiveness. Your Majesty the Queen, Miss Fiona, yes. Miss, may I have some time with you? Saying that, Siren reached out to invite Fiona. Aben saw the scene before him, thinking, are they trying to push me aside? Then he quickly stepped in front of Fiona. No. Fiona was cut off by her foster father, glaring angrily at Siren, who barely paid attention to Aben and looked toward Fiona, continuing to ask the young lady's opinion, but Fiona smiled, pushed Aben aside and replied to the prince, of course. Then Siren gently took Fiona's hand. It's my honor, he said, kissing her hand, making Fiona somewhat embarrassed. Aben, the foster father, seeing his daughter kissed by another man, became very angry and looked displeased. Although he could do almost nothing at that moment, with Miss Fiona's consent, Prince Siren turned to the queen. Then I ask permission, he said, taking Fiona's hand and leaving the banquet room. As they walked, Fiona annoyedly asked Siren, what did you eat? What was that attitude earlier? Siren smiled smugly, then asked Fiona with a teasing tone, what attitude? Fiona's face clearly showed embarrassment. She wondered what to say, feeling like he enchanted her, but kissing the back of her hand was something nobles often did. Siren glanced at the young lady beside him, smiled softly, then quickly pressed her against the wall. Because the others kept staring at you. I did that on purpose. It seemed now he only noticed her attitude. Fiona blinked repeatedly, thinking he was strange today. Siren kept that posture, holding Fiona's hand tightly and asked, why are you here? Last time you wanted me to stay and help you, right? I remember. But did you really listen to all my requests? If I can help, Siren muttered. If I can help. He was about to adjust his tie, but Fiona noticed the tie annoyed him, so she helped loosen it before he could raise his hand, and they continued their conversation. So Fiona, why are you helping me? By then the tie was completely undone. Fiona paused a bit. Because I value you. As soon as she finished, Siren rested his head on her shoulder, making her flustered and stammer. Sir Siren, he spoke a little coquettishly. You two really know how to confuse people. Fiona wondered what exactly Siren meant. Confuse people is enough. If you keep this up, I will do as I please, Siren said decisively. Fiona, tomorrow and the day after, the street will open a night market. Fiona was excited when she heard that. Really? It must be fun. Siren held her hand tightly. Let's meet. His face was flushed red. His hand held hers tightly, pulling her close as he extended an invitation. I want to go out with you. Just the two of us. His face was flushed, eyes full of passion, holding her hand tightly. Let's meet. I want to go out with you, just the two of us. Her hand was tightly held by him. She shyly looked at him, blinking, and replied, okay. 2 days later. She wore a simple outfit with a bow on her head, walking down the stairs, her face flushed, heart pounding as she thought of his words. Just the two of us. Like going on a date. While she was daydreaming, telling herself not to overthink it. Suddenly, he was leaning against the door with his arms crossed, calling her name. Fiona, I'm waiting for you. She was startled, shaking off her random thoughts, and walked forward to stand opposite him. He looked puzzled. Eric, how did you sneak out? He didn't understand her meaning and asked, what do you mean? She ran back and forth behind him, quickly replying, isn't it normal? Most royals secretly create a secret path and sneak out that way. So? She thought to herself. In movies and novels, it's always like that. He helplessly looked at her. The exit gate was still intact. Why do it that way? After hearing him say that, she asked curiously, did you bring secret guards with you? He turned and stepped outside, replying to her. Bringing them along is cumbersome. Stop talking nonsense. Let's go. Seeing that, she hurriedly followed behind, saying, hey, wait for me. He sighed, not knowing what else to say, thinking she always imagines silly things. Unlike someone else who lost sleep thinking this was a date, he went ahead and waited on the carriage. She hurried after him, pouting, I told you to wait for me. At the other street, the lights were dazzling, people bustling, shopping and chatting lively. She couldn't help but exclaim, It's bigger than I thought. He wore a cloak with a hood, standing beside her, nodding in agreement. Yeah. Suddenly a boy appeared from nowhere and bumped into her, making her frown. She thought, this place is crowded. If we lose each other here, it would be a big problem. Thinking that, she immediately reached out and grabbed his hand, startling him. He stopped for a moment, looking at her, smiling happily. Holding his hand, she thought, if it's not a date, holding hands won't hurt, right? She held his hand, but he silently loosened his grip and didn't hold back. She asked, Siren, don't you like this? Is this just childish, or should I stop holding your hand? He sighed, touched his forehead, then tightly held her hand again and pulled her forward. Slowly, he said, holding your hand is not the problem, Fiona. She followed behind. He was surprised. His face flushed like a tomato, bowing his head shyly to explain. The problem is me, she wondered, asking, why won't you answer my question? He replied, I'll tell you later when we part today. Although his words were confusing, she was still excited to enjoy the festival with him. From afar, Fiona saw a stall selling drinks and asked him, Siren, want some juice? He still held her hand and replied with a simple, okay. The stall owner was a young man with reddish-brown hair, smiling and constantly inviting customers. She let go of his hand and ran over. Standing in front of his stall, choosing a drink, suddenly he spoke, Hey, beautiful lady, are you alone? She held the cup she bought, looked up at him, thinking Siren just went to buy snacks. Before she could answer, he placed his hand on her shoulder and continued, If you're alone, come walk with me and enjoy the market. Suddenly, he didn't know from where. A furious man rushed forward and blocked him, causing him to fall to the ground. Coldly looking at him, he said, If there are two people, that person is me. She stood beside, watching the scene. She exclaimed, That's amazing! Then turned to Siren. Looks like your reputation in the capital is quite famous. But I don't understand why in Halo, there's no bit of fame at all. He stood behind, frowning. One of the reasons Fiona couldn't become famous. He asked, You look happy, huh? She smiled and handed him the cup she was holding. He also handed her the snack bag he just bought earlier, nodding. Yeah. And he also handed over the snack bag he just bought earlier. She nodded in response, saying, uh-huh. He turned around, pulling her hand to continue speaking. He didn't look happy at all. She was confused and only managed to say one word. Ah. Suddenly, she stopped and pointed towards a blonde dancer dancing on the stands. Everyone was gathered tightly around. She said, Siren, look over there. What is she doing? She said. Suing watched the dancer with gentle, graceful moves, thinking it might be Siren's mother, was also a street singer. She held his hand and asked him, Shall we go watch? He smiled and replied yes. She also smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily, it seems Siren is also enjoying the festival. After the festival ended, the two got on the carriage to go home. She was tired and dozing off on the carriage. When they arrived home, he immediately woke her up. Fiona arrived, still sleepy with droopy eyes, stepped off the carriage. He got off first to help her down, worried she might fall. He reminded her to step down carefully. She yawned repeatedly and replied yes. Seeing that, he reached out his hand to help her down. Come here. Seeing you like this makes me uneasy. He gently lifted her down. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she said thank you. Suddenly, she became fully alert, recalling what he said last night. Wait, he didn't understand. What's going on? She asked again. What is it? She continued talking about what he said he would tell her later. He still hadn't said it yet. He said the problem lies with him. What does that mean? She thought to herself, could it be because their statuses are different now, so he feels awkward? He stammered and replied if he said it now, she might have just woken up and forget immediately. She hurriedly urged him to speak, saying she was awake now. He said okay, hesitated a bit, then took her hand, interlaced his fingers with hers, and said, this is the problem. Because when holding your hand, it's not just simply like that, but I have thoughts beyond that. He moved closer and continued. First, he wants to hold you tight, touch you. Then he said halfway through, he moved forward to kiss her, making her shy and blush, thinking, wait, could he be thinking about that? She shyly turned away. He gently shook her and said, wake up, Fiona. Hearing that, she breathed a sigh of relief, thinking so, it's not a kiss. Ha ha ha. She pushed him away and summarized what he said. So, to sum up the situation, he wants to do this and that with me physically. He replied since last time he already had these thoughts. Can't you summarize it more reasonably? Could it be she really took his words in that direction? She shyly nodded and agreed, saying it's probably just the instinct of youth. Or before she finished speaking, he laughed and asked Fiona, "Do you think I'm a pathetic guy who looks at women with wandering eyes?" He blushed and continued, "I only have those thoughts because the other person is you." He gently stroked her platinum hair, emphasizing, "It's exactly only you." Her face flushed pink. She looked up at him and asked, "Is this a confession?" He stroked her hair and agreed with her words, "Yes." The wind rustled, petals flying everywhere, creating a romantic atmosphere. He lifted her face to face, confessing with the familiar words, "I like you, Fiona." She looked up. Now her eyes only had his image. He continuously reassured her not to be nervous. She could think as long as she wanted. He was just being quick to prevent anyone else from interfering. He kissed her forehead lightly and said goodbye to give her time to think. "Good night, Fiona." He got on the carriage and left, the sound of the carriage wheels fading away. But she still stood there, putting her hands on her head, pulling her hair, mumbling to herself, "This is just a dream, right?" The next morning, her face was blank, dark circles clearly visible. She sat in front of a table full of delicious food, holding a plate, recalling the scene of his proposal. She thought last night's event probably wasn't a dream, right? Her father sat beside her, put down a glass of wine on the table, made a sound, propped his hand on the table, looked at her and asked Fiona, "What happened between you and Siren yesterday?" Her aunt was holding a glass of wine, startled, quickly denied, "No." He asked again which side. She was confused and asked, "Aunt." He raised a fork and analyzed. "First, you were confessed to. Second, Siren did something that made you uncomfortable." As soon as he finished speaking, he stabbed the fork he was holding into the steak on the plate, making a sharp sound, his face showing a dangerous, cold expression. Continued, "If it's the first, I'll spare his life, but if it's the latter, I'll fabricate it as a natural death." She broke out in a cold sweat, thinking, "Who? Siren?" She politely replied, "It's the first." His expression was disappointed. Replied, "Is that so?" She looked at her father's expression suspiciously, thinking, "Look at that. Such a regretful face. Why?" He asked again. "Even so, I thought normally you would smile and politely refuse when being confessed to." She pouted in anger and replied, "Do you think I'm that heartless?" Seeing her angry expression, he teased her, "If it's just a confession, then you know how to handle it yourself. But if it's above that level, I will handle it for you." She blushed and spoke up to protect him, but there's no way to deal with Siren. After breakfast, she returned to the study, resting her head on the table, worried. It's all ruined, and it's all Siren's fault, she thought. She couldn't ask Aben's opinion, because he would insist on fabricating it as a natural death. She cried inside, thinking, according to the rules, Siren should have been in love with Eunice by now, but he confessed to me instead. I tried to arrange a destined love, yet I can't even ask him why he doesn't like Eunice. She imagined him with a big body, 8-pack abs, carrying a sword on his shoulder, looking very handsome. So why does Siren like me? Originally, they were both good friends. Or rather, only she wanted to be good friends with Siren, thinking that she would help Siren emotionally when he was young. Then suddenly she recalled every childhood memory between them, thinking that her becoming his good friend was just to fill her own satisfaction. She silently blamed herself for treating Siren well, which made him like her more. At the same time, it helped reduce her guilt. Honestly, even though I wish Siren happiness, I don't fully give him a sincere friendship. She felt guilty, thinking Siren liked her without knowing about her pretense. This pretense of mine is truly a guilty matter and herself. This situation is also somewhat worth pondering. From her standpoint, whether the plot follows the rules or not is an issue. According to the rules, my ending would be tragic, suffering both physically and mentally. If the story doesn't follow the rules, some problems will arise later. Darkness will continuously appear, and the beasts will become more violent. Surely the ending will become harder to prevent. If we want to eliminate the darkness, we need Eunice's power, and the turning point that awakens that power, which is basically Siren's love. If Siren is no longer involved with Eunice, and she never realizes her own power, the world might perish. She clenched her hands, thinking further about Eunice's and Siren's power. It can help push back some of the darkness, but the chance that I won't die is basically impossible. She wanted to escape the chaos in her mind, shaking her head. No, the issue she must face right now is the problem. How to deal with Siren's confession. Thinking carefully, He didn't propose. It was just a confession. Isn't it just swallowing tears and kicking the wall at once and it's done? While she was chaotic in her thoughts, Siren came to her door and knocked lightly 3 times. He asked, "Fiona, are you there?" She immediately thought of a plan. But first we have to negotiate, right? She thought he arrived earlier than she expected. Her hands clenched tightly, silently determined. This is a good chance to break the horn and leave. Fiona looked toward the door with determination and tension. She must kick Siren out immediately. Standing by the window, she thought Siren's feelings were simply a memory effect. They were just feelings toward the first girl who had been friends since childhood. Honestly, she was really despicable for staying by Siren's side. What kind of repayment for memories is that? Truly scary. After thinking, she said, "Come in." The door opened with a click. Siren stepped in politely, greeting, "Good morning." She turned around coldly and asked, "What's the matter?" Silently thinking she must be colder still. He said nothing, pulled the door lock. The click startled her. She asked again, "Did you lock the door?" He looked expressionless at her. "Locked it. Don't misunderstand, I'm afraid Aben will come disturb us. We're just talking," she replied. "Oh, I see." Seeing her worried, he reassured, "If you feel uneasy, I'll just stand here." Hearing that, her face blushed slightly, lowering her head, thinking, "That's fine." She recalled their childhood memories. The other person was Siren, and indeed his confession made her feel truly new. But there was no need to treat him like a stranger. He leaned against the door with both hands in his pockets, saying, "Fiona, it's hard to talk from so far away." She looked at him, understanding, then stepped closer, continuing, "Siren, about your confession yesterday." But there was no need to treat him as a stranger. He leaned against the door with both hands in his pockets and spoke, "Fiona, it's hard to talk from this far away." She looked at him with understanding and took a few steps toward him, continuing, "Siren, about your confession yesterday." Before she could finish, he cut her off. "What part of me do you hate?" Surprised by his question, she looked up, confused. "Hate you? She paced back and forth, thinking, "Where exactly? I can't figure it out." After a moment of thought, she replied, quickly defending herself, "When we were kids, didn't I say I liked this face the most? Then what about your personality?" He didn't answer, making her unable to continue, silently blaming herself inside, saying that is really speechless. He sighed and continued, "What don't you like about my personality?" She continued, "Whatever I say, you'll fix it, right?" He nodded in response. "Exactly." His serious expression surprised her a bit. This guy is really serious, a prince who is not only handsome but also capable and tries to accommodate everything I want. Switching to a thoughtful state, she thought, this must be like in a novel. In real life, there's no guy like this. Suddenly, he reached out to stop her thoughts. "Fiona, you once said if you like someone, you must treat them well. Right?" She stammered in response. "Yes, that's right," he quickly added. "I remember everything you've ever said. And I also said sometimes you have strange thoughts, saying you think about me. But this time, if you still have thoughts of wanting good for me and avoid me again." He spoke in one breath, then bowed, placing his hand on her shoulder, looking at her with determination, emphasizing, "I won't let it go." At that moment, her mind was chaotic. She just wished Siren happiness, the greatest happiness for Siren. What she knew was falling in love with Eunice, like the principal, but things didn't unfold perfectly. Like the original principal at the beginning, this was also the only thing she could know at that moment. She reached out to gently stroke his face, saying, "Your personality is just like this, right?" He quickly grabbed her hand. "That's because I think I always understand you best, but there will come a time when I realize this is the biggest mistake." She felt the warmth from his palms spreading out, thinking, his hands are really big and warm, while she herself was always weak-hearted with Siren. She wasn't confident she could coldly reject him by accident. If she agreed, then next the two would be in love, right? Thinking about a male-female relationship, she imagined the two of them dating and wondered what else in this world was as deep yet fragile as a male-female relationship. Then she thought again. According to the principal, the relationship between Siren and Eunice that she once wrote in the novel was just destined love. In real life, that kind of thing doesn't exist, so she thought if it were in the past, she wouldn't believe in love. But looking at reality, even if she became Siren's lover, the ending would still be the two of them parting ways. Just thinking about it made her heart ache sharply. An indescribable feeling appeared once Siren's feelings for her cooled down. She just needed to gently let go of his hand. First love. Confessing naive love. Everything now was as beautiful as starlight. sparkling in the night sky, but once it ends, it would vanish quickly like the shadow of a wave, crashing against the rocks. All of that person's enthusiasm would eventually cool down. So if she couldn't refuse, she might as well go along with Siren. Who knows, maybe there wouldn't be any big problem. After thinking carefully, she said, "I understand now, Siren." He didn't understand her meaning and asked curiously, "What?" She shrugged, placed both hands on his shoulders, kissed his cheek with a smooch. He was surprised, blushing and speechless. She spoke again. "You said you wanted to do this and that with me, but you're already surprised at just this?" She raised her hand to stroke his blushing cheek, her heart pounding as she responded to his confession. "Since you said that, I will accept your confession." He stood facing her, looking at her affectionately, his heart pounding. He bent down and kissed her red, plump lips, thinking she was really adorable. The atmosphere was romantic, suddenly interrupted by loud banging on the door outside, followed by her father's angry shouting, "I know you're in there, Siren. Come out right now, I'll count to 5. The two inside turned pale and panicked. It was Aben. Meanwhile, outside, the countdown began. 1, 2. She thought only at times like this was he like her protector. She reached out to touch his lips to stop him, just like that. He scratched his head helplessly and replied, "Got it." She smiled at him. "That's more like it. Start with the little things. Then fall in love." Outside, the door banging continued loudly and incessantly. "Counting to 5 now," she shouted angrily. "What did the door ever do wrong?" More banging and it might break. In the magnificent royal palace, a knight dressed in armor walked down the corridor, walking while looking around, marveling that this is the royal palace from the rumors. How? Clearly my father. The father of Marquis Eric was already waiting when he arrived and immediately asked the boy, "Your wound is almost healed and recovered. After recovery, come to the prince's palace and supervise the 2 princes." He replied in panic, "Yes, sir, but I am working in the Grand Princess's palace." He turned around and pointed at him, instructing, "While you were resting, I already changed it for you. Supervise carefully. If anything strange happens, remember to report to me. This is an important matter for the family." He went outside, sighing wearily, not wanting to do meaningless things. This boring political struggle must end in my father's lifetime, who was already fed up with this cumbersome matter. Suddenly, he saw a bunch of knights lying scattered ahead, startled and wondering what happened. Among them, a knight was trembling and called out to him, "I heard you returned to work and were transferred here, so it's true." He bowed, looking at his pitiful figure, asked why everyone is like this. He replied tremblingly, as if lifeless, "Because the training was too exhausting." He spoke a bit arrogantly. Honestly, a knight complaining about training being tiring, what should be done? Hearing that, he angrily shouted, "Because you are the new guy here, that's why you speak like that." He asked back, "What's the difference?" Siren, not knowing from where, came behind him and asked why everyone is lying there, then turned to look at him and asked, "Who are you?" He turned around, saw him, quickly knelt and bowed with 7 bows. "God Ares, first time meeting Prince Siren." He continued, by His Majesty's order, "From today I will take on the duty of protecting the prince's palace, even though my body is still not well. But I will try my best." He was surprised to see him so spirited. His mood darkened, thinking, "What is this guy doing? Overacting. It's the first time someone greeted me with such formal ceremony." He kept like that without responding, drenched in sweat, worried inside. Why is he silent? At the Crown Prince's palace, the room was chaotic. Half-finished bottles of wine lay scattered all over. The Crown Prince kept angrily smashing things, frightening the maids outside, standing silently in the corner. Not daring to speak, he cursed, "Damn it, that bastard Siren," he thought. "My life has always been perfect." He imagined the glorious image of being the only son of His Majesty the Emperor. Who dares to disobey me? Yet today, Siren was officially appointed prince here. Because of that illegitimate child appearing this way, even though I thought he was just a tiny mouse, I could just tolerate him. But he joined social events where many people came. After tiring from smashing things, he sat down and drank the leftover wine in 1 gulp. After drinking, he threw the cup aside, recalling the time Siren grabbed his collar at a party. And the reason was because I only discussed a woman. Pausing a bit, he thought about when he becomes emperor. The first thing will be to execute that bastard. But that day is still far away. Drunk, he took a long breath and said, "There's no way to bully him?" Suddenly his eyes lit up, thinking of a way to teach Siren a lesson. It's to go after the only woman that Brad has some feelings for, Fiona Halen. He remembered the scene where he grabbed the collar threateningly. If you dare lay a finger on her. Smiling darkly, it was obvious that guy was infatuated with that girl. Let me try to mess with him. Although it's a bit difficult to touch the Duke's daughter whom he protects, if I can't do it myself, I can just use others. Thinking this, he chuckled and ordered the servant, quickly call the assistant here. A few days later, at Duke Halen's house, Siren and Fiona were walking together in the hallway. While walking, she said she couldn't keep going with the Duke, always causing trouble wherever they went. She recalled when she talked with her father. His superior attitude always mocking. Do you think our house is a pigsty, or what? Don't you see there are still people alive here? She turned to him with a displeased look, complaining. He replied, even so, if Aben wasn't like that, he wouldn't have been able to protect Halen until now. Hearing him say that, she was startled and nodded in agreement. That's true. It's time, Halen. Hearing him say that, she was startled but nodded in agreement, and it was indeed true. She rubbed his face and smiled brightly. So he admitted it too. His face flushed red. His eyes filled with her image. Grasping the table, his hand caressed his own face. Then he leaned in to kiss her, leaving her stunned for a moment. Embarrassed and at a loss for words, she could only stammer a few words. He smiled, watching her reaction, and continued speaking. Don't be so surprised, because we're already familiar with each other. From now on, as long as you initiate first, I will respond. She was wronged and angry, pulling her hand away from his and asking, since when do I start? While the two were happily chatting, suddenly a servant entered and greeted, Your Highness the Prince. He didn't bother to look, sighed and muttered, Why is it unnecessary, but the ability to find people is so good? She whispered quietly, Who is it? He looked annoyed but answered, The person from the other day is someone that Marquis Eric placed in your palace. Eric, panting heavily, put his hand on his chest and said, I've been looking for you all this time. Please don't leave every time I'm on guard duty. He realized there was someone else beside him and quickly bowed. Sorry. So there's someone else too. I've already bowed 7 times, she said without blaming him, then introduced herself. I am Fiona Halen. The man standing beside her coldly said, I don't need a guard. Before he left, he asked curiously, Then why don't you need one on the day I'm on duty? He didn't answer but hurriedly pulled her hand and left. Let's go, Miss Fiona. She hurried after him, calling out, Your Highness the Prince. Before leaving, she didn't forget to turn her head and look back at him once, thinking to herself, Looking at that style, maybe he suits Siren. As long as he's not from the heiress family, that's good. But it's not like Romeo and Juliet. Why can't they be close just because of their families? She thought while giggling, making the man beside her curious and ask, What strange thing are you thinking about? The two walked toward the stairs where a maid was waiting. The maid bowed and reported, Miss Fiona, the Duke is looking for you. She pointed at herself in doubt. Me? Then quickly headed toward her father's study. When she entered, he was standing with arms crossed, looking out the window as if deep in thought, saying, I will return, Halen. She repeated his words in doubt. About Halen? He nodded. Yes. She asked again, What happened in Halen? He replied, It's not that, but Jerome is about to kill me. In the letter he wrote that if things continue like this, he would be overthrown. She imagined him busy working, thinking that without her and Aben handling the documents, he must be very distressed. He turned to her, placing his hands on his hips seriously. No matter what, I have neglected my territory for too long. I must return to see how things are. But in his heart, he worried, thinking about when he returned to Halen. Those staring at Siren and Fiona were not just 1 or 2 people. Perhaps during his lifetime, he couldn't see the crown prince become emperor. But with the appearance of darkness, the attacks of the magical beasts became fiercer. If that foolish crown prince became emperor, he wouldn't have any proper strategy. Then Halen would bear all the damage and pressure from the north. He didn't want to just stand by and watch that fool ruin his territory. That's why he brought Siren to the central area. Seeing his father's face wasn't good, she called loudly, Duke, son. I don't know if it's okay without the Duke. He quickly replied, I'm worried too about your relationship with Siren. She angrily clenched her fists, shouting, Wait, why are you worried about that? He responded seriously. Seeing this, she could only scratch her head and sigh, thinking, the Duke is really stubborn. He looked at her, thinking the two were grown up and already at the final step, so what? Then he quickly pinched her face, smiling kindly, but as a father he was always cautious and gave her advice. Without me here, don't do anything reckless. At least before I close my eyes. She was pinched on the cheek, making one side of her face blush. She spoke in a sulky tone. If you pinch me again, my cheek will fall off. She was sitting in a carriage, seeing the Duke off. She couldn't help but wonder if this was a shortcut, or why it was so desolate. A guard riding beside her joked. She couldn't help but wonder if this was a shortcut or what, as it was so deserted. A guard riding beside her joked. Because the master has returned to Halen. If anything happens to the young lady, surely we all would lose our heads. Another guard added. Surely she's not stubborn enough to want to turn back like she did in Halen, right? She angrily leaned out of the carriage to retort. Hey, when was I like that? But he continued. As far as I remember, the young lady once led troops to attack the soldiers at walls number 2 and 4 like a rat. She crossed her arms and slowly said, That was just me disciplining them. He proudly rambled on about past events. At that time, Miss Fiona was truly the best, a cute little girl who smiled adorably while knocking down burly men. She thought to herself, Am I really like that? Then he continued, I'm not scolding the young lady. On the contrary, many are infatuated with her. She asked, Infatuated with what? He hurriedly explained, I'm serious. Among my friends there's one who, before he could finish, he was startled to hear footsteps approaching. So he moved closer to her and anxiously said, Someone is coming! Then hurriedly urged the horse forward, signaling to the young lady. Don't get out of the carriage! He shouted loudly, warning the guards. Be careful! There's an ambush! They were a group of strangers attacking. A man wearing a hood pointed at Fiona and shouted, That girl is in the carriage! Quickly, capture her for us! Fiona frowned and looked outside the carriage, seeing many hooded strangers rushing toward her. She quickly pushed open the carriage door to get out, but 2 guards shouted urgently, Young lady, you must not come out here! However, she ignored the warning and swiftly moved toward them, smiling softly as she said, Let's act as usual. Her gaze was cold as she lightly snapped her fingers twice. Instantly, a long line of light appeared on the ground. It appeared beneath the feet of the attackers, who began to panic and scream. Flames blazed fiercely under her gaze. The 2 guards turned pale and muttered. Every time we see the young lady's magic, she turned to them and smiled. You 2 protect me, all right? I'll stand in front. After capturing all the attackers, she gently brushed her hands and looked at the sprawled bodies. They were rolling on the ground, she informed her guards. They're all unconscious now. Only one man remained conscious. Then she turned to look at the still alert man. Her expression was terrifying as her high-heeled shoe lightly stepped on the man's foot, causing him to cry out in pain. The atmosphere was extremely cold as she began to ask the man, Who sent you? The man, in pain, hurriedly confessed, We thought you were just a normal noble entrusted to kidnap a wealthy young lady. She asked again in a low voice, Who sent you? But he shook his head, showing he didn't know who was behind it. Behind Fiona, the 2 guards silently thought, We really saw the master's presence. Looking at the young lady, she gently called Raider and ordered him to handle the dead and find out who they were and deal with them appropriately. She thought if she showed mercy, she'd be killed. So she couldn't leave any threats behind. She pondered for a moment, then said, I'll go ask around a bit. The 2 guards kicked the door open and entered. The man sitting on the chair was startled and angrily shouted, Who are you? She slowly sat down in the opposite chair and calmly said, Hello, I am Fiona Halen. The man's expression suddenly changed when he realized Halen was one of the 4 great families. He knew she had no reason to come to mercenaries. He knelt down and forced a smile, inviting the young lady to talk. Fiona leaned on the chair, eyes closed as if deep in thought, then said, I had some unpleasant business with your mercenaries, so I came to inquire a bit. She gently continued, Your guild has always been neutral, so I have no petty calculations against you. However, I just have one question. She paused briefly, then suddenly opened her eyes, her expression serious as she asked, Who is the mastermind behind this? The guild leader was sweating profusely, but still refused to reveal the mastermind, which made Fiona think. Even mercenaries wouldn't resist a duke, so could the mastermind's identity be even higher than the Halen family? She decided not to press further, making the guild leader breathe a sigh of relief. However, Fiona glanced at him and asked, Can this kind of thing not happen again? Because I'm just a weak, noble lady and afraid of encountering such troubles. The guild leader scratched his head, clearly hesitant. She quickly glanced and signaled to the guard Isaac standing nearby. Isaac nodded in understanding, quickly stood up, grabbed the guild leader's hair, and slammed his head down hard on a beam, shaking the ground. She looked up, waiting for the answer. The guild leader, trembling with fear, nodded repeatedly, assuring, Of course, miss. Standing behind, AI Jack was also sweating coldly, thinking how terrifying it was. After receiving the satisfactory answer, she stood up and left, lips curling into a smile as she called back. I won't reveal your wrongdoing to the Duke. Where is the Duke? She left happily and satisfied. As she walked, she pondered the family behind the orders, someone with a status even higher than the Halen family. She needed to investigate thoroughly because now she was responsible for everyone in the household. That night at the Halen family estate, while Siren was sound asleep, a black-clad assassin silently approached the bed from the balcony above, muttering to himself, I heard he can defeat a dragon, so I thought it would be tough, but it seems my worries were in vain. Without any caution, he slowly drew the knife he carried and raised it toward him. I'm sorry, but you should just die. As he swung the knife, Siren suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. Grabbing the assassin's hand, holding the knife, he asked how much he underestimated him. Siren pressed the knife against the assassin's neck, cutting a small line that caused fresh red blood to drip down, then continued speaking. If you want to kill me, don't be so reckless. At least bring Fiona or Lon here. The guards outside rushed in shouting loudly. Siren's clothes and hands were covered in fresh blood, and the assassin's corpse lay at his feet. He frowned coldly, looking at the guard who had just entered, ordering, No more noise. Close the door and come in quickly. The guard entered the room and obeyed his order. At that moment, Siren suddenly called out, RS. The guard was confused, not yet understanding what was happening when the knife in Siren's hand suddenly swept past his head. He panicked, eyes wide, trembling and stammering, asking the one who just Siren turned to him with a fierce gaze, coldly questioning, Are you the one the family sent? The guard stammered, denying it. Siren stepped closer to him, the atmosphere growing heavier. The guard was terrified, eyes wide as Siren approached, slowly stepping toward him, raising his hand to grab the bloody knife on the wall. The guard sighed in relief, face pale without a drop of blood, thinking he definitely couldn't stay here anymore in this damned place. Siren stood by the door to the balcony, thinking to himself that this incident probably had nothing to do with that guy. He always paid attention to him, but he was different from his father, so he kept him around. At that moment, as Siren turned his face toward the balcony, the guard placed the knife that was just used to kill on his shoulder and suspiciously asked again, Your Highness, is that right? Siren didn't even look at him, eyes gazing out the balcony, coldly replying, I will deal with you and inform everyone that my guard died bravely fighting the assassin. The guard turned pale, thinking, Indeed, he even considered killing me. His expression was unclear as he opened the door wide and stepped out onto the balcony. He thought that only by distinguishing trustworthy people could he maintain his position. He pushed down the hook the assassin used to climb into his room, threw it below, then sat heavily on the cold floor, leaning against the wall, thinking how nice it would be if Fiona could be by his side at times like this. Scene shifted to a ball in another magnificent mansion, with melodious music echoing throughout the hall, noble young ladies and gentlemen excitedly dancing together. In contrast, Fiona was alone in an empty corner, completely unfocused on tonight's ball, lost in thought. Who was behind ordering the mercenaries to assassinate her while she was thinking about how to make everything go according to the rules and overcome the harsh reality? But now, the story had completely contradicted the rules, and the cause of everything originated from her. Suddenly, a cold glass of wine was placed beside her, startling her out of the chaotic thoughts in her head. Siren, holding 2 glasses of wine, came over and asked what she was thinking about so intently. She turned to accept the glass in his hand, then replied that she was thinking about the time she was assassinated. The two continued their conversation. Then she suddenly asked if he had nothing else to do. He sipped the wine in his hand and gently answered her. There isn't, when he gently touches her platinum blonde hair, playing with it as he asks again, You still don't know who the culprit is, right? If you did, I wouldn't let that person off easily. She nodded in agreement, then turned to push Siren away so he couldn't touch her hair anymore, citing the reason that there were many people inside, so if they were seen, it wouldn't be good. However, Siren didn't care about that. On the contrary, he gently kissed the back of her fair hand, and he still wasn't willing to stop. He hugged her even tighter. Fiona blushed, secretly thinking he was getting bolder. He hugged her close, continuing to caress her long, flowing hair, whispering into her ear, I really like your hair. It's like spider silk. She repeated his words. Spider silk? I didn't think you'd think that way. Then, pretending to be angry, she said, If you keep messing with it like that, it'll get tangled and impossible to comb. He hurriedly bent down and lightly licked her fair, alluring shoulder, startling her. It felt like electricity was running through her body, leaving her no time to react. Suddenly, her words, Wait made him pause, and he apologized, saying he wouldn't do that again without her consent. Fiona shyly denied it, and her thoughts advanced to the final step, wondering what it would be like if the two of them were together, and that it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. However, she shifted her thoughts to the rule that Siren would spend the night with the female lead, and that spending the night with another girl wouldn't be strange. She held back to prevent that from happening. Siren looked at Fiona with a vaguely embarrassed expression and said, "If you hate it, I won't do it anymore." She smiled gently and explained, "It's not like that." But seeing his lost and uneasy look made her want to tease him even more. Then she suddenly paused, comparing him as a child, and now, noticing a big difference. She suddenly felt a sharp pain in her heart. Hating her own weakness, she wondered how much he would suffer when they parted if things stayed like this. The feelings she had for him grew stronger, making her unable to control herself and feel afraid. In a moment, she said a simple goodbye, leaving Siren standing there alone as she turned and walked away. Fiona walked down the cold hallway enveloped in darkness, lost in thought. If he hated her even a little, would her heart feel more at ease? Lost in thought, she suddenly heard footsteps behind her. She thought Siren had returned, but it wasn't him. It was the Crown Prince raising his hand to greet her. It had been a long time since they met. Although she smiled in response, she was cursing silently in her heart. Quickly lifting her skirt, she bowed in greeting. "Your Royal Highness, the Crown Prince." Fiona pretended to ignore the Crown Prince's words, smiling gently in reply, "I don't think we've met before," even though she had met him before and had interrupted his flirtation with the Duchess. He frowned, seemingly angry, but suddenly broke into a sly smile, realizing this was an opportunity to talk to her. "Since Abin isn't here, I'll continue our earlier conversation. It's a pity I once sent a gift to the young lady." Hearing that, she hesitated slightly, thinking she had never received any gift from the Crown Prince. So why would he say that? But suddenly she recalled the words of the mercenary guild leader that the person behind it had a high-ranking family or clan status. So it was him. She frowned slightly, clenching her hands behind her back, and slowly asked, "Have I ever offended you or something?" The Crown Prince nodded in agreement, even dragging Siren into the conversation, which made Fiona angry but unable to vent. Suddenly, he gave a strange smile and began to grope her. He slowly approached her. Placing his dirty hand on her shoulder, he lifted her chin and looked at her with a disgusted gaze, saying rude words, "You look better now, so if you're obedient." The more he spoke, the more impatient she became. She quickly shook off his dirty hand and kicked the Crown Prince. Causing him pain, he crouched down. He glared at her, while she stood tall above him. Looking down coldly, she said, "There really are people who only speak rubbish." He angrily stood up and rushed toward her, raising his hand to hit her, but she was quicker, dodging the slap and mocking him, saying, "Your reaction is quite slow." He lowered his head, holding his head, showing clear anxiety and fear of being hated by her. She sat across from him, staring as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then suddenly, he stood up and moved to sit beside her, making her heart burn with a desire to protect him. She asked if he could lean forward, and immediately she did not hesitate. She unbuttoned his shirt and placed a gentle kiss on his neck. Meanwhile, his mind went blank, his face flushed red. His heart pounded as he asked what she intended to do after marking him. She looked pleased and satisfied. She gently watched his reaction, but unlike her, he trembled and clenched his hands tightly as if holding back something. He looked shy like a young girl in love and asked in a soft voice, "Do you want to tease me?" She playfully dispelled the awkward atmosphere, telling him it was just a normal thing, so he shouldn't worry too much. The carriage rattled along the quiet road while the two of them chatted lively. Fiona suddenly turned serious and looked at him, asking if he was hurt. He propped his chin on his hand, seeming thoughtful, then nodded in agreement. She looked puzzled, but before she could react, he suddenly lunged closer to her, placed his hand on the carriage side, bowed his head, and asked for permission. "May I kiss you?" Without much thought, she firmly and bluntly refused, her tone teasing a bit. "Just endure it a little, okay?" He sighed and returned to his seat. Muttering to himself, "I'd rather be hit by you than like this," she sat beside him, laughing happily and satisfied. However, inside she had a different thought. "You are really a bad person. Even though I like you, I can't open my heart." She was happy to see his shaken expression because of her. After a long time riding in the carriage, they finally arrived in front of Fiona's house. She got off the carriage, looked up and said, "I like you, so please remember that." She said goodbye and quickly turned to enter the house. He sat in the carriage, staring at her back, then sincerely asked again, Fiona, what is your true happiness? She stopped, surprised, turned around to look at him, clenched her hands in her lap, thought for a moment, then answered, I don't really know. That night, lying in bed, she tossed and turned, thinking about his question and the memory she had since coming to this world. She felt something strange. Had she accidentally lost something? She hadn't realized what she truly wanted. She kept tossing and turning, thinking about this issue, unable to sleep. The next morning at the Halen mansion in Fiona's study, she was focused on work when an older maid came to talk to her. Today, you will attend the family's ball, Priscilla, right? She nodded politely in response. Please prepare the outfit for me, she said. The maid standing beside her clasped her hands and bowed, showing understanding. She kept thanking the maid for preparing all the documents she needed. The maid smiled kindly in reply. It's my duty, so no matter how many tasks the lady requests, it's no problem. She reviewed the documents, silently admiring. She really is an angel to be able to be Aben's governess. But why hadn't he learned even a bit of kindness from her? As she vaguely thought of him, she pictured his cold, always frowning expression, not allowing anyone near him. It made her involuntarily feel sorry for him. Then she flipped through the documents, focusing on studying them. She noticed the Deadlands had reappeared, something rarely seen. She also reviewed the locations of the Deadlands she had previously marked on the map. They appeared without any rules. She thought about the principle that he had confessed his feelings to her hundreds of times, also something outside the rules. But the darkness didn't reveal the reason for this. She closed her eyes tiredly, thinking back from the beginning. No one had found any special clues about the Deadlands appearing during the hunting contest, so for now, they needed to consider what to do about the darkness. The necessary people to eliminate the darkness were Eunice, Siren, and Fiona. The darkness had no definite form, so a vessel was needed to trap it inside. However, not everyone could become the vessel. It had to be someone who could maintain their physical form, even when facing the darkness. The most suitable person to be the vessel was Fiona. The principal stated that the darkness had been pushed into Fiona's body, who was going mad from Eunice's power, while Siren had fought fiercely with that body and barely won. If this time I also become the vessel, then everything will be resolved, but doing so will kill me. She leaned back into the chair, crossing her arms over her chest, continuing to think. She really hated that. She wanted to survive, so she needed to find out how strong Eunice's abilities were and also investigate the darkness further. Finding someone who contained the suitable darkness was also important. However, even if it was AI, it was still finding someone to die in her place. So she felt uncomfortable inside, and since it was almost time to attend the party, she sat at the dressing table for the servant to prepare her. At that moment she thought of Fiona, wondering where she had gone according to the rules. Or maybe because she was in this body, she had disappeared already. When the maid behind was brushing her hair, suddenly stopped, looked at her with a sincere smile and asked if the young lady wanted to let her hair down today. She turned and glanced at the maid, showing confusion, and asked back. The maid stammered and hurriedly explained that there was an insect bite on the young lady's neck. She touched her neck, then looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes narrowed angrily, thinking about the culprit who did this. It wasn't AI but Siren in the main hall of the Priscilla family mansion. Under the bright chandelier, the guests were immersed in the melodious music, dancing gracefully on the stairs. Siren knelt on one knee and lightly kissed Fiona's hand. In a Western-style painting, a beautiful picture like a prince, proposing to the princess. His face blushed as he looked at her tenderly and praised her. Today you look really beautiful. She shyly looked at him. Her face also flushed with embarrassment. He continued speaking. Today you also let your hair down. He fondled the strands of hair on her chest and complimented that it suited her very well. She sighed, looking frustrated, asking if he knew that it was because of him that she had to let her hair down. He was embarrassed and replied it was because of him. She frowned, lifting her hair to reveal a fresh kiss mark on her neck. She continued. Luckily her maid was still young and very innocent. His face blushed. He shyly responded that next time he would be more careful. She replied that he had said he wouldn't do that again. No matter what. Just be careful next time to help me. He laughed out loud. All right then, I will be careful next time. She was shy and confused, asking why he was laughing. A Libyan young lady holding a fan, covering her face, standing behind Fiona, spoke with a smile, greeting the two. Happy they accepted the invitation to the party. She also gently smiled, lifted her dress slightly and bowed in response, thanking for the invitation. and he, beside her, nodded in agreement. The Libyan young lady gently beckoned. The family emblem instructed the staff to bring wine here, and also asked if Fiona and Siren wanted to drink. Fiona, standing beside, eyes brightened looking at the glass of peach-colored wine she liked very much. The taste was very sweet. She did not hesitate, happily picked up the glass and quickly took a big sip. To his surprise, he beside her looked worried and told the waiter, change her drink to a non-alcoholic one. She asked suspiciously if he didn't like to drink wine. His eyes were firm but helpless, looking at her, and replied, it wasn't like that, but it was better if she didn't drink today. She held the glass, swirling it in her hand, then looked at her with admiration. She turned to him and gave a professional, polite smile. May I have a drink with your dance partner? Her face blushed from the wine just now, thinking silently that she was really beautiful. And he beside her closed his eyes with a displeased expression and replied, if only for a moment. Fiona and Libya both went together to another luxurious room, decorated quite simply with a piano placed in the center, a few potted plants around. She happily held the wineglass, opened the door and stepped in, directly asking Libya, what did she want to say to her? She covered her mouth laughing and said the young lady was really straightforward. She was embarrassed and shy, thinking she had forgotten how to socialize since she always spoke bluntly when fighting. She asked if she still remembered the promise between them. She seemed to recall the promise with her prayer. If she helped her, she would help her build a position in the upper class. Then she replied that she still remembered after receiving the answer she wanted. She stepped closer and placed her index finger on the wineglass, smiling and asking if she can restore that promise. She asked confusedly how to restore it, then turned away with a sad expression and said, recently the queen has been keeping an eye on her. She wondered what the queen had said to her that made her so worried, then recalled what she had done to the crown prince a few days ago. She had also beaten him up in a deserted place, and later she would pay him back fully, then continued speaking. With her current situation not looking very promising, she sat down, leaning her shoulder against the piano, swirling the wineglass in her hand, replied that she knew that, but in this situation, she had no other choice but to rely on her. She also gently sat on the nearby chair and replied calmly, compared to asking you, wouldn't it be better to ask His Highness Siren? Libya replied, although His Highness, the prince, is also a strong person, what she saw was the talent of the young lady. At that moment Fiona appeared in her mind, who helped her escape from His Highness the Crown Prince, and when she used magic, she continued, she had confirmed twice already, then paused for a moment and began to confess that she had no ill intentions towards His Highness the Prince, but hearing Libya say that, she couldn't help but be surprised, looking at her and asking again, but why? She pouted, frowned, showing anger, and continued, I hate people who can't remember my face, especially when they are involved with another girl. Libya recalled the story she had encountered. I have to tell you, before I accidentally bumped into His Highness Siren, when I looked up he said that, oh, so he is someone close to Fiona. Back to the present, she said irritably. Until now, there hasn't been a single man who couldn't remember my face since the first meeting. She just smiled wryly, thinking that even though she said such things, she didn't feel disliked. She even thought it was a kind of ability. She spoke up, meaning she would expect my future potential, and she would also help me. She immediately replied, unfortunately this is only help from myself, not the Priscilla family, because my father always tries to maintain the family's neutral position. She asked back what help she meant. She replied, it was about me and young lady Fiona. Becoming closer in the upper class, she raised her thumb and index finger and said, if so, isn't it simply just becoming friends? Suddenly she was startled, silent for a long time without saying anything. She waited but got no response. Feeling the atmosphere a bit awkward, suddenly stood up, extended her hand to Libya and smiled, hoping that in the future young lady Libya would favor her more. Libya was processing, looked up at her and smiled gently, thinking to herself, friends, huh? I also hope she will favor me. When the conversation ended, both stood up, shook hands, showing happy cooperation. Then Fiona stepped out of the room, then saw him standing waiting for her, happily said, Your Highness, have you been waiting long? He put both hands in his pockets. Expressionless, replied with just one sentence, No. She hurriedly approached, pulled his hand close to his ear and whispered that she and Libya were on the same side. Fearing someone might overhear, he pulled her hand and walked outside. While walking, she kept talking. She would be politically neutral, but besides that it seemed she would support us. because she also hated the crown prince. He also replied that he hated that bastard too. While walking suddenly, he stopped, gently turned to her, seriously said he also hated having to share time with her to someone else. She asked suspiciously, "What?" Then laughed. "Haha, why would you say that?" He seriously replied, not joking. Then pulled her close, lifted her hand to stroke his face, and joked, "Playing with me is more fun than with her, so I will try to make that happen. Fiona, Fiona." Ignoring his hand rubbing against her, she called his name. Thinking to herself she could only admit that she blushed and trembled, thinking this method really worked. She pretended to be angry and said, "Is it because you know I'm soft for you, so you show it openly?" She snatched her hand away from his, turned and left first. She thought the innocent blushing kid with the first kiss was gone. Quickly return. "Siren here," said angrily. "I will be closer to young Lady Libya." He sighed helplessly and replied, "That's a pity." She stopped, turned toward him, asked him to lend her his hand for a moment. He asked why, but still extended his hand to her. She put both long, slender hands on it. He raised his hand to caress her face, making him blush shyly all the way to his ears. Not daring to look at her, he turned his face away. She smiled quietly to herself. Of course he would be impressed. He said in a sulky tone loudly, "Why are you suddenly doing these actions? You look so annoying." Trying to seduce him with her face, she slowly stepped closer to the balcony, her gaze distant and gentle as she spoke. "No matter what, don't worry too much about Miss Libya, because I always consider you the most important person in the world." He bowed his head, his eyes briefly sad as he replied to her, "What I'm concerned about isn't Miss Libya, but that she is always surrounded by many nobles at the ball." She turned around, puzzled, looking at him and asked, "What should we do about that?" He angrily pinched her cheek and said, "If you go with her, they will also pay attention to you, won't they?" She screamed loudly, asking him what to do. He crossed his arms over his chest, looking at her standing opposite him, rubbing the cheek he just pinched, and told her to try switching places with him. "Then imagine that scene," she muttered to herself, "trying to switch places. Then imagine him surrounded by other girls, his arms embracing two women." She returned to reality. She pouted angrily, raised her hand toward him and shouted, "Siren, you absolutely must not catch two fish with one hand, okay?" He nodded, smiling gently at her in response. "Finally, you understand my feelings, right?" She continued speaking. "If you no longer have feelings for me, then we probably have to stop." And hearing that, his expression darkened. She seriously said, "If you want to meet someone else, you have to properly handle the previous relationships first. Do you understand?" He looked thoughtful as if pondering something, then suddenly spoke. "So, that's how it is." Siren returned to his magnificent mansion, the bodyguard trailing behind, loudly questioning him, "Your Highness, why did you go out without taking the bodyguard with you?" He coldly stepped forward, thinking that bringing them along would be a hindrance when with Fiona, but the bodyguard did not give up. Angrily clenching both hands, following behind, continuously nagging, "You're too much. At least answer me. If you keep not letting the bodyguard finish speaking," he rushed to slam the door loudly, causing the bodyguard outside to be unable to react, angrily continuing to shout inside, "If your temper keeps being so grumpy, you'll soon be dumped by someone's daughter." He angrily turned his head and slammed the door again, causing the bodyguard outside to be frightened, deciding that running away was the best option. After the bodyguard left, he turned back and plopped down on the bed, sadly pulling at his collar, muttering to himself, "I'm still not caught yet." Suddenly he paused, looking at the hand Fiona had rubbed on his face. He raised his hand to touch his forehead helplessly, lying down on the bed thinking, "Damn it, I thought after the two became lovers, I would feel satisfied to some extent, but it's not like that at all. Just thinking about her brings dark thoughts." He wanted to see her smile happily, but also wanted to see her crying and clinging to him. While his mind was in chaos, suddenly Fiona's words from earlier echoed in his head, "If you no longer have feelings for me, then we probably have to stop. If you want to meet someone else, you have to properly handle the previous relationship first." He buried his head in the pillow, tossing and turning on the bed, sighing, wondering if he really wouldn't get dumped. Outside the Priscilla family mansion, dark clouds gathered and heavy rain poured down, raindrops hitting the window pane, creating a tapping sound. Inside the Priscilla Marquis mansion, he was sitting on the sofa in the living room, holding a letter gently, and said to Libya, "The marriage proposal letter has arrived." She wore a black outfit with intricate design, standing opposite the Marquis, immediately responding, "Oh, my father doesn't seem happy, does he?" He hesitated and replied, This is the marriage proposal letter sent by the Crown Prince. She silently held the letter in her hand, examined it for a moment, then said, "This is indeed the royal emblem." She clenched the letter tightly and bowed her head thoughtfully. The difference between being teased by the Crown Prince and officially receiving a marriage proposal letter was so great. The image of the Crown Prince with a lecherous face and crude words made her angry, clenching both hands, silently thinking, "He has disregarded my feelings and arbitrarily wrote a marriage proposal letter." Libya immediately asked her father, "You don't mean that, right?" The Marquis looked kindly at Libya and replied, "If you don't like it, I won't do it, my dear daughter." Before he could finish speaking, she nodded and replied, "I understand, father," she thought to herself. "This is the official royal proposal. If you want to refuse properly, you need a clear status." She smiled with determination in her eyes and said to her father, "As long as I get engaged to someone else, right?" He looked at his daughter, eyes wide and mouth agape, as if he couldn't believe his ears, suspiciously asking, "But is it okay to find someone so quickly?" She sighed helplessly and replied, "We have no other choice." He sat on the chair, looking thoughtful and murmuring, "Why are the Queen and Crown Prince in such a hurry?" Although father knew they were wary of His Highness Siren, Libya continued, "Maybe they want the Priscilla family to strengthen their power through this political marriage." The Marquis raised his head, looking tired and worried, and asked, "Even so, Libya, please think carefully about finding a fiancé at this time." She seriously considered, "If this way doesn't work, the easiest method left is to create a scandal big enough that I can't get married." She walked down the corridor gloomily, angrily thinking, should I tarnish the honor I've worked so hard to build just because of someone like the Crown Prince, or not? I haven't done anything wrong, so why should I suffer? While lost in thought, she suddenly stopped, coming up with a new idea, spreading a damaging rumor about the Crown Prince. She imagined him being defamed, which brightened her eyes, at a magnificent mansion, surrounded by a garden of blooming red roses. Fiona held a letter she had received from Duke Aben, stating that everything in the Halo family was being resolved smoothly and there was no special invasion, so he would return to the capital soon. The letter was signed Aben Halo. Fiona sat relaxing by the window, reading the letter, smiling. "Nothing happened, that's good." She put the letter down and immediately thought of Aben's smug face. "Lately, I feel that Halo is much better than the capital. Some merchants deliberately come down from the capital, so they revealed everything about the severe bribery demands in the capital, which made her worry. Suddenly, she found a letter stuck between a stack of documents. Huh? She hurriedly took the letter and opened it. It turned out to be a letter sent from the mercenary guild that had caused trouble for her before. She suspiciously held the letter up, flipping it back and forth. But it was just a blank sheet. She thought, although it seemed like they were joking with her, sending this letter was also a warning to be careful. Then her hand suddenly burned and incinerated the letter. She thought maybe the Crown Prince was so angry that he had cast a curse somewhere. Fiona suddenly remembered that meeting and became cold, saying, "You'd better come meet everyone, and say those words yourself that you were beaten by a young lady of lower status, who looks weak," she reminded him. The Crown Prince was speechless. After arguing with her, he looked very furious. This time, he might even send a real assassin. Returning to reality, she looked out the window and saw the guard watching the mansion approaching. She called out, "Isaac!" Isaac came near the window, placed his hand on his chest, bowed and smiled. "Miss Fiona, I was also on my way to find you," she asked curiously. "Isaac, what happened?" He placed both hands behind his back and seriously reported, "Last night, someone broke into the mansion." Then he added, "Thanks to Mrs. Request, we had increased security beforehand, so he couldn't get inside the mansion." She hurriedly asked, "Did you catch the intruder?" He scratched his head apologetically. "Sorry, the soldiers chasing him got distracted by something else and let him escape." Fiona anxiously asked, "Anything else?" He quickly recounted that early this morning, a mid-level monster appeared on the street, with the upper body of a human but the lower body of a giant spider, with sharp claws that terrified people around, causing chaos as they scrambled to hide. She thought, why would a mid-level monster appear in the middle of the capital? He lowered his head and spoke quietly, continuing, "Luckily it didn't pierce the barrier." She recalled that around the capital there was a barrier created by the first goddess. Therefore this is an extremely safe place from darkness and monsters, where people can freely laugh and talk, settling down and making a living. She rested her hand on her chin, worried and thoughtful. If the barrier is broken, it won't just stop at one monster. Surely more than 10 fierce and warlike monsters will attack, she thought. If the barrier unfortunately has any problem. She hurriedly turned inside. Seeing this, Isaac worriedly asked, Miss? She reached out to take the coat hanging on the wall, coldly ordering Isaac. Prepare the carriage for me, please, she said as she put on the coat and continued. I intend to stop by here for a moment. In a simply decorated room of the tall building, the guild leader was sweating profusely, trembling, bowing his head, hands clenched tightly like a child who made a mistake, suspiciously asking. We kept silent as promised, and even sent a warning letter, but why did you come here again? She placed her hand on the table, leaning forward close to the guild leader's face, teasingly replied, By the way, I stopped by, pretending to probe. I wonder if you can catch the cunning rabbits who dared to sneak into my house. The guild leader looked up in surprise, mouth agape, stammering to explain. That wasn't us, she half-jokingly asked again. Really? The guild leader hurriedly replied. Yes, because we lost 7 times in a row, they were very angry. Mid-sentence, the guild leader scratched himself, stammered and stopped talking. She frowned angrily, thinking, this guy probably won't say another word, pretending to ask. Then, do you know anything about the monster that appeared early this morning? The guild leader reluctantly replied, The corpse of that monster wasn't handed over to us to handle. What? She angrily narrowed her eyes coldly. Am I asking about the corpse of that monster? The guild leader realized he had misspoken. Lowering his head in anger, grinding his teeth, unable to speak, she attacked again with a tricky question. Anyway, I intend to investigate where the monster's corpse has gone. Good, then where did that monster come from? The guild leader anxiously glanced around, then stood up, walked to the window, pulled the curtain and looked back at her. Hesitatingly asked, If I tell you, will you protect us? She crossed her arms firmly, resolutely replied, Of course. After receiving her affirmation, the guild leader began to recount, Actually, that matter doesn't directly involve our guild. But recently, mercenaries from other guilds have done something very special. It seems they have captured monsters alive and imprisoned them. She interrupted to ask, So, what have they done with those captured monsters? The guild leader gestured quietly, whispering just loud enough for the two to hear, Mercenaries will do anything for money. I don't know much beyond that. She stood still, closed her eyes as if understanding everything. So it turns out the monsters didn't pierce the capital's barrier, but were brought in by humans. She began piecing everything together and realized, although there were some variables, so I forgot, but in the end this is still a novel, so some things have been predetermined. She rubbed her lips, recalling the plot, the story. If monsters appear due to human interference, there is only one event that can happen at this time. Suddenly, images of nobles dressed magnificently appeared in her mind, wearing masks of various shapes, passionately playing in the gambling hall, gradually losing honor in the upper class. Suddenly her eyes lit up with an idea to exploit this in a useful way. Inside the luxurious mansion, in the middle of the room was a large staircase connecting the spaces and floors of the building. Every detail in the room was meticulously and sharply designed. The huge chandelier in the center made those who entered feel overwhelmed. As they admired, bursts of lively laughter and chatter were heard. Libya stood out in the crowd with red hair surrounded by other noble ladies. Suddenly, one of them spoke up to ask, Libya, I heard you received a marriage proposal letter from His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. After hearing this, the other ladies nodded in agreement, congratulating her. Congratulations, said a blonde lady, with a large flower pinned on her head, hands clasped before her chest, admiringly said, His Highness has spoken a lot about this. That's why I said how much the Crown Prince adores Miss Libya. Libya shyly smiled warmly, thanked everyone but silently thought she hadn't responded yet and he was already making a fuss. Then what everything really happened because of a certain room? Fiona was sitting on a chair, looking worriedly towards Libya, asked Miss Libya, Are you okay? She crossed her arms over her chest, leaned against the wall and casually replied, Of course I'm fine. She bent down, placing her hand on her forehead helplessly, so there's no other way. Both fell silent, making the atmosphere tense. Suddenly she became serious, asked Miss Fiona how to make the other fall into hell, causing her, who was drinking tea, to be startled and spit it all out. She wiped the corner of her mouth with a napkin, stammered asking again, Who? She smiled slightly, raised her hand to her mouth mysteriously. Who else? She thought, startled. She had thought she would bother Eunice, like in the original story. But the person she mentioned was the Crown Prince. not Eunice. She stood up, her voluminous hair fluttering in the wind. Her unfriendly gaze imagined the crown prince laughing and chatting happily with his subordinates. She spoke up. There's a way. Then stepped closer, covered her mouth with her hand, whispered how to make the crown prince fall into hell. She recalled the illegal speculation event in the original story. This was also the event where Siren and Eunice joined forces to solve it. They discovered the speculation floor. After thorough investigation, they had to clean up the matter to enhance their own reputation. The image of the two standing side by side, he raised his sword towards the opponent, gave her an uncomfortable feeling. It's okay, described. But she thought the urgent matter now was to restrain the crown prince, so she would skip the intermediate process and directly step up to resolve it in the mansion's garden. Flowers competed to show their bright colors with all kinds of vivid hues. Butterflies fluttered around. Fiona sat beside Siren, telling him she had found out the ones who ordered mercenaries to capture the magical beasts. Probably the same people running the speculation floor. He listened attentively, then asked if they made the magical beasts fight and bet money. She nodded, replied, yes, just like a horse racing track. His tone coldly said, they really were fools. He doubted whether those running the place could control those magical beasts. Then she sat with arms crossed, tone angry, but looking cute, agreed with his words. I thought so too. We must quickly wipe out that speculation floor. He stepped closer, suspiciously asked her, but Fiona, how do you know about the illegal speculation floor? Making her a bit startled, she turned to look at him, almost kissed his cheek. Her face flushed, heart pounding, stammered, unable to speak, thinking, wow, his face is so close to mine. He looked at her curiously, thinking the way we both gathered information was quite consistent. She pointed her index finger at herself, looking sad, pretending to be sulky, said, now you're doubting me, huh? He sat opposite her, quickly denied. No way, how could I doubt you? He continued explaining, because sometimes you know more than others. She opened the food box she brought, softened her tone, said, all right, you could say I have foresight. He agreed with her, adding, yes, Aben also highly values you for that. She felt uneasy, thought it really wasn't natural. She must pay more attention later. For someone who knows the rules well like herself, it's natural, but for others, maybe not. Seeing her sad and thoughtful, he gently touched his head to hers to comfort. Don't worry about nonsense. His cheeks blushed, continued saying, just like you said, you're on my side, so am I. So no matter what happens, her face blushed hearing such sincere words. While she felt someone empathized with her, he pinched her cheek and said, so just get straight to the point, isn't it because you have something to say that you're in a hurry? She struggled, screamed, ow now, only able to utter some unclear words, then firmly said, I want to catch those running the illegal speculation zone while also ruining Crown Prince An's reputation. Chongtae Ra stretches his legs forward, looking at her affectionately, thinking to himself that she's still blushing and saying things like this is really... As she continues excitedly, tell me about your next plan to make that happen then. She said she didn't like the Duke, but still persistently called him father, so she said it outright. She said she didn't like it. But when the Duke asked, so when will you call me father? She turned away and answered stubbornly. Maybe never, she said, hearing that. The Duke paused slightly. After a moment of silence, he said, I understand. He looked somewhat gloomy, making her a bit unsure of what to do. Hey. At that moment, Count Aben rushed past her, leaving only the words, let's go home. She was flustered, wondering why she suddenly felt disheartened. At just the right moment, she hurried after the Duke, saying, let's go together. Then she thought maybe someday she would call him father just once. Scene shifts to a few days later at the beautiful mansion of the Priscilla family. Fiona is attending a tea party. She was secretly thinking, why? It's a bit unbelievable that I've come to Libya's tea party. At this time, she wore a long dress with a striking red top, chatting happily with the other young ladies. One young lady said, it's truly an honor to meet you, Lady Fiona. Another young lady also said, me too. Meanwhile, Fiona was forcing a smile, quietly recalling how the young lady Libya had said to her before parting, I'm about to host a tea party. May I invite you, lady? She continued to be lost in thought. She thought it was just empty words, but to her surprise, the invitation card was actually sent. Then young lady Libya said to her, just enjoy the tea party. She smiled and replied, thank you. In her mind, she was a bit puzzled. Libya isn't the type to be kind to others without reason. So, what is she really thinking? While sipping tea, the young lady next to her asked, by the way, I heard you made a bet with Duke Ernest. Someone immediately asked Lady Fiona. Exclamations from other young ladies echoed. One young lady asked, "What kind of bet?" The young ladies looked at her with sparkling, curious eyes. She had to answer honestly. Not exactly a bet, just a small promise. If I win the upcoming hunting contest, Duke Ernest will recognize me as the heir of Halo. But the young lady's eyes sparkled even more. A contest for victory? Isn't that too dangerous? We will cheer for you, Lady Fiona. I didn't expect you to do that just to be recognized as the heir of the family. That's so cool. She politely replied, "Thank you, everyone." At that moment, another young lady spoke up. "Ah, Lady Fiona, I have a question. I heard there is a very terrifying mage in Halo." Hearing this, she frowned. Another person continued, "I heard that too. I heard that person laughs while slaying monsters, turning the surroundings into a sea of blood." She was angry, thinking, who spread that rumor? Then Livia also spoke up. "But I heard a different rumor." She raised her teacup and continued telling, "That mage protects Halo all year round, where there is only a cold winter. The people of Halo worship and call that mage like this." At that moment she glanced at Fiona and smiled, saying, "The Winter Guardian." Fiona's eyes also looked at her, her heart suddenly pounding. At the royal palace, right in the training ground, Siren and another person were practicing sword fighting with fierce energy. The sound of swords clashing rang out, while everyone around was exhausted. Some were lying on the ground in pain, others staggered and leaned inside. Siren struck his opponent, who panicked and let out a loud, "Huh!" Siren's eyes sharpened. "What happened? Where did that fierce spirit go?" he said. Then his hands swung the sword relentlessly, making his partner unable to defend and get hit. The sword flew far away with several sounds, but Siren remained calm and let out a cold snort. He smiled faintly. "Is that all? The guards escorting the crown prince? Just like this? Then who is the protector? Who is it?" The soldiers hiding in the corner had their eyes wide open and mouths agape. "I can't believe I lost to a newbie soldier. That guy didn't even seem tired." Siren slung his sword over his shoulder. Noticing the gazes of the 7 gods looking at him, he thought, "They must be thinking I'm just an illegitimate child. A brat just 20 years old, right?" He smiled smugly, looking like Avon, watching 2 rookie soldiers trembling and holding their heads at his feet. He recalled the man's words, and indeed should rearrange the ranks based on challenges. At that moment, a servant came to report. "Your Highness, there is a guest," Siren asked. "A guest?" Then turned his back and walked away, replying indifferently, "I don't like being disturbed while training. If it's just a normal guest, please see them off." Hearing this, the servant bowed and agreed. "Then I will convey the message and see Miss Fiona Halo off." As soon as he heard the name Fiona, his feet suddenly stopped moving. Siren smiled brightly. No need. I will come right away," he said cheerfully. The surroundings seemed to emit a sparkling, adorable light, completely opposite to when he was training, leaving everyone who saw him stunned. He happily gave orders. "I can't meet Miss Fiona looking all sweaty and covered in dirt like this. Quickly prepare a bath for me, and don't forget to remind them in the meantime. Please receive Miss Fiona with utmost respect so she won't feel bored." Then he turned to look at the soldiers. After training, they were like lost souls around him. He decisively gave orders, "And you all run 50 laps around the training ground." They couldn't do anything but bitterly obey, forming a line. Preparing to get ready to run, they still wondered who exactly Miss Fiona Halo was and how she could move that monster. Meanwhile, Siren had already started preparing to take a bath. He pulled up his shirt to reveal his muscular body, dreaming as he worked. Unexpectedly, Fiona came to see him first. Time passed until Siren finished bathing and went out to greet Fiona. The two whispered to each other. Fiona, with a displeased attitude, began to tell Siren, "Do you know what rumor they call me? They call me the Protector of Winter." Siren smiled and asked her, "Protector of Winter? Well, some people call you that too, Halo," Fiona said, then froze. She slammed the table and grunted, clearly surprised. "Really?" Siren continued. "Yeah, because you never pay attention to your surroundings." Fiona sighed embarrassedly. Seeing her sigh, he quickly comforted her. "No need to be embarrassed, because you really are that amazing." Then he thought to himself, "The more confidently you say that, the more embarrassed I feel," Fiona said, staring intently at the young man before her. She had been worried that Siren was treated badly here, but luckily he didn't seem like it. Apparently, he was even quite famous among the maids. At the same time, a maid came to bring tea to the two. Thinking this, she smiled quietly. Siren looked at her, blushing. his mouth still firm as he asked, "What is it?" but inwardly praised her for being adorable. Fiona happily continued, "I feel a little moved when someone calls me the protector of winter.